In 1963, Hollywood combined a classic Western with William Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew and came up with the crazy comedy called McLINTOCK. It starred John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara and was directed by Andrew McLagan, co-starring as John Wayne's son, Patrick Wayne, Stephanie Powers, and YVONNE CARLO. And it was actually produced by John Wayne's production company. Now, looking at the film on the surface, it kind of seems to be a knockabout comedy, but John Wayne actually intended for the film to be a statement of his own conservative political views. There are numerous indications of this, and there are constant jabs at other left-wing people in Hollywood and in the country that he takes no mercy on. An example is the role of the really weak governor in the movie. The name that John Wayne came up for that governor was Cuthbert H. Humphrey, and this was a direct parody of the liberal senator from Minnesota named Hubert H. Humphrey, who John Wayne just absolutely detested. John Wayne was actually kind of irritated and annoyed when some of the promotional events for the movie were postponed for a week or so following the assassination of John F. Kennedy. You see, John Wayne strongly disliked the Kennedys, and he really blamed them for losing the Bay of Pigs invasion and for giving in to the Soviets' demands during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The film was a huge success, and it actually helped John Wayne enormously offset some of the financial costs that he had endured when making the movie The Alamo in 1960. John Wayne was always real good about including his children in projects that he did, and this ended up launching their careers in the process. The character of Dev was played by John Wayne's son, Patrick, but there was another son that was involved too. His eldest son, Michael, served as the sole producer of the film. Michael had worked on many other film projects in the past, but McLINTOCK was the first one that he fully produced himself. According to this son, Michael, John Wayne really wanted to do one of his own stunts in the film. He thought that it just looked like fun. The stunt required John to jump from a hayloft down into a pile of hay below. The studio wasn't too keen on that idea, since John Wayne was one of the brightest stars in Hollywood at the time. He finally won the argument, though, and he got his chance to perform the stunt himself. But they also did a second take of the scene with a stuntman as well, just in case something went wrong. Now, sometimes when they make films, they substitute other substances for what look like the real thing that they're trying to portray. And that was the case in the famous mudhole brawl that takes place in the movie McLINTOCK. The mud wasn't actually mud at all. In reality, the substance was a material called bentonite. This material is typically used while drilling wells, and it kind of resembles chocolate syrup in terms of appearance and consistency. The good thing about it, on the movie screen, it stands in as a good substitute for mud, which is usually much thicker. Now, one of the most frequently quoted lines that John Wayne admirers quote is the word pilgrim. It's often said like, "Whoa, take her easy there, pilgrim." But as famous as this line was, he only used this in 2 movies. The first was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is where Pilgrim originated from. In that film, he uses the word 23 times. But McLINTOCK was the second film and the final film that John Wayne used the term pilgrim, and he only used it once in this movie. Now, there was one scene in the movie that required a large number of longhorn steers. They needed about 500 of them. And since there's not a whole lot of people out there who have about 500 steers handy, they had to go looking other places to find some. The crew ended up getting those steers from a real unlikely source, the Mexican government. They offered to loan the crew the 500 longhorn steers that they needed, and they were able to shoot the scene as planned. And I guess there's actually a difference between Mexican longhorns and American longhorns. It's said that the Mexican version have horns that point upward at the tip, and the American longhorns point downward at the tip. Now, like John Wayne in the movie, Maureen O'Hara had a stunt that she wanted to do herself. The stunt actually involved her jumping through a plate glass window. And the studio just deemed this was way too dangerous for her to do herself. But the studio actually didn't stop there. They felt like it was way too dangerous for any stunt woman to execute. As a result, a stunt man ended up performing the stunt instead. Dean Smith was the stuntman used, and he completed the stunt while wearing a wig and dressed in Maureen's costume, so he resembled her character. Now, there's a little bit of a discrepancy on what Stephanie Powers recalls and what the director, Andrew McLagan, recalls that happened on the movie. Stephanie Powers claims that at one time during the shoot, John Ford came to the set to direct the movie for a week, but the actual director, Andrew, says it never happened. The truth of the matter probably is that John Ford was there because he and John Wayne were such good friends, and he probably gave some insight into the direction that helped the crew out and the director out. Now, the failure of the original copyright holder to renew the film's copyright resulted in it falling into public domain hands, meaning that virtually anyone could duplicate it and sell it in VHS or DVD form. With this happening, many of the versions of this film available on the market today are either severely edited or they are extremely poor quality, usually because they've been dubbed from a second or third generation copy of the movie. John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara portrayed a married couple in the 1952 movie The Quiet Man. In that film, John Wayne's character walks into the house drunk and shouts at Maureen's character, "Woman of the house?" In McLINTOCK, his character again walks into the house drunk, and he uses the same call to get her attention. He says, "Woman of the house?" Now, one of the supporting roles in McLINTOCK was played by the immensely popular and beloved lady, YVONNE de CARLO. In this movie, she plays Louise Warren, a widow who moves into the McLINTOCK home with her 2 children, and she serves as a housekeeper and a cook. YVONNE appeared in a number of starring roles in her early years, but she was kind of forced to accept supporting roles as her career declined. Now, the truth of the matter is, she would not be in this film if it wasn't for John Wayne absolutely insisting on it. John Wayne wanted her in the film because her husband, stuntman Bob Morgan, had been seriously injured while working on the movie How the West Was Won. And John Wayne felt terrible about this. These injuries that occurred to him put an end to his career. And that's why John Wayne wanted to help his wife out in the role in McLINTOCK. Towards the end of How the West Was Won, there is a gunfight on a moving train between the sheriff and the gang of train robbers. Bob Morgan, YVONNE's husband, was one of the stuntmen playing one of the robbers, and he was crouched down next to a pile of logs on a flat car. The chains that they had holding the logs together snapped, and Morgan was crushed by the falling logs. He was so badly injured, it took him 5 years to recover to the point to where he was able to move by himself and walk unaided. He eventually recovered, but his days as a stuntman had ended. The film was shot at Old Tucson Studios, west of Tucson, Arizona. Now, many of the cast and crew had worked with John Wayne in numerous films throughout the years. And one of the most famous scenes in the movie is when John Wayne gives Maureen O'Hara a spanking with a coal shovel. And it's said that he really got into this, that the director actually had to slow him down, that her bottom was black and blue for weeks after filming this. John Wayne is also seen wearing his famous Red River D belt buckle that he wears in so many of his films. It can be seen in the scene where G.W., his character, addresses the homesteaders about 10 minutes into the film. The film was a box office success and was actually the 11th highest grossing film of 1963. Every John Wayne film is always fun to watch, but you add Maureen O'Hara into the mix, and you've got a real winner on your hands. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.